Hello, class. Today we are going to cover Math 131, Objective 14. For Math 131, Objective 14, we're going to solve quadratic equations by completing the square. So I need you to recall that a perfect square trinomial is the square of a binomial, okay? And I put two of them here in this table. We have x squared plus 8x plus 16. If we take that x squared, figure out, what that is squared, and take the 16, figure out what that is squared, we will get x plus 4. And that will be the way we kind of talked about it in class, like, that possible solution for that binomial squared. And then, of course, we checked it in class to make sure. So we have another one. We got x squared minus 10x plus 25. Of course, if we broke down the first and the last one, and of course, we take that sign of the middle term, we would get x minus 5 squared, okay? Some of you like to do this the first way we talked about it, where you take, looking at this second one, the 25, and you think about, two things that we can multiply to get positive 25, and we can add them to get negative 10. And we have x minus 5 and x minus 5, okay? Either way, however you get to that binomial square, we need to be able to get from that trinomial to the binomial squared, okay? So for this particular part, though, when completing the square, we need to know this little equation here, okay? There are other ways that this method is taught that I feel are a little complicated. I feel like this is the easiest way that you all will understand it and make the problems go a lot smoother, okay? So for each perfect square trinomial, the square of 1/2 of the coefficient of x equals the constant term, okay? So we're going to look at these two from the table, and we're going to keep this equation in mind. 1/2 times the coefficient of x squared equals the constant term. So if we look at this trinomial here, x squared plus 8x plus 16, okay? If we look at the plus 8 in red, that is the coefficient of x. So we need to do 1/2 the coefficient of x squared, okay? So 1/2 times 8 will be 4, and 4 squared is going to be 16, okay? If we look at the second one, the number in red, that negative 10, that is the coefficient of x. If we do 1/2 times negative 10, which will be negative 5, and then we square that, we will get 25, okay? So keep this in mind. This is what we will be using to complete the square, okay? So when we complete the square, of course, for these problems, the number in blue, the 16 and the 25, we had that number right there, okay? But when we complete the square, it's like that number is missing, okay? So let's look at the first example so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So for example 1, we're going to complete the square on x squared plus 12x. As you see, we have the first two terms. We don't have that third term. That is what we want to find, okay? So we're going to complete the square to find that third term. Then we are asked to write the resulting perfect square trinomial as the square of a binomial, okay? So let's get started, okay? So we have x squared plus 12x, all right? And we don't know what that third term is, okay? So we're going to use our little formula over here. We got, and I like to write it like this, 1/2. I like to plug in my coefficient of x. In this situation, the coefficient of x is 12, all right? So I have 1/2 times 12, and then I'm going to square it. If you write it with the brackets, it may help. You want to make sure that you square it after you multiply it by 1/2, okay? You don't want to square it and then multiply, okay? So writing it with the brackets, that helps me, okay? So take my advice, please, okay? So 1/2 times 12 squared. The 1/2 times 12 is going to be 6, and then the 6 squared is going to be 36. Okay, so if we complete the square, we're going to have x squared plus 12x plus 36. Okay, and if we write this as the square of a binomial or a binomial squared, that will be, if we look at the x, we got an x squared, and here we got a 6 squared. So it'd be x plus 6 squared, okay? So this is how this kind of works, okay? We found that third term, we completed the square, and then after we have that, square completed, we need to be able to write it as the square of a binomial, okay? So let's look at example 2. We are asked to complete the square on x squared minus 3x and write the resulting perfect square trinomial as the square of a binomial, all right? So let's do it again. We have x squared minus 3x, and we need whatever that third term is, okay? So I'm going to set up the formula, the 1/2 times the coefficient of x squared. In this case, the coefficient of x is -3. So 1/2 times -3. For this one, let's just write it as a fraction. -3 over 2. And then if we square that, we'll have 9/4. So if we complete the square, it'll be x squared minus 3x plus 9/4, okay? And then if we wanted to write it as a binomial squared or the square of a binomial, it will be x minus 3/2 squared, okay? And I want you to know that any quadratic equation can be solved by completing the square, okay? So this is the gist of how we complete the square, okay? We have to find that third term by doing 1/2 times the coefficient of x squared. That is going to give us that constant term, okay? Now that we know how to do this, we can apply it to the problems and continue to work the problems, okay? So we have to continue and we have to keep going. We have to use this technique to solve the quadratic equations, okay? So let's see what that looks like when we do this technique and then continue in our solving. All righty. This is going to be example 3, all right? So our directions on this one, we are asked to solve by completing the square. And this is what we have to work with. Okay, we have x squared minus 6x minus 15, okay? So we're going to go through all of the steps on how to do this. So when we do that completing the square technique, okay, we need to notice or know or remember that we only had the two first terms, and then we found that third term, right? So since this problem has 3 terms and then it's set equal to 0, what we need to do, this negative 15 here, we need to move it to the other side. So we're going to add 15 to both sides, okay? When we do that, it's going to leave us with the first 2 terms over here, and then we have a number on that other side, okay? So this is how we want it to be, all right? Now we need to complete the square. So we want to look at this side, and we want to think about how we're going to complete the square, okay? So we need to do 1/2 times the coefficient of x squared. The coefficient of x is -6. So over here, I'm going to go over here and write this out. 1/2 times -6 squared. Of course, 1/2 times -6 is -3, and -3 squared is going to be 9, okay? So what do we do with this 9? Okay. Now, we know it's going to go here. Okay. But it's also going to go here. This 9 is going to go in these two places. Okay. So I need y'all to follow me with this. So I'm going to use some different colors so we can see this, see where this 9 is going to go. Okay. So this 9 right here, we're going to drop it right there. And we're going to drop it right there. So we're going to add that 9 on both sides. Please do not complete the square on the left side and not add it on the right side. We don't want to do that. We're going to have to add it on both sides. Remember, this is an equation, and the only way we can keep the equation or keep that equal sign true, whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other side, okay? So we're going to add that 9 to both sides, okay? Now, on this side, now it is a perfect square trinomial. So we need to write it as a binomial square. So it will be x minus 3, okay? And again, this right here, this over here is going to give you a hint as to what that binomial squared will be. See how we got this -3 in here? So we know it's going to be x minus 3. That's one way to know. Or you can, think about the other ways we have done this. All right, and because of that sign, it'll be x minus 3, like that. Or you can set it up like this. We need two numbers that multiply to be 9 and add to be -6. So it'll be -3 and -3. However, okay, it's going to be x minus 3 squared. And it's going to equal, on this side, we need to add these two together. So 15 plus 9 is going to be 24, okay? So after we do all of this, we completed the square and all that, we got the square of a binomial and all that. When we get to this step here, this line, we're going to continue by doing what we learned in objective 13, okay? So since we have something squared, we can now take the square root of it, okay? So after we do all of the completing the square business, okay, we then pick up with objective 13, okay? For this particular problem, if we continue, our answer is not going to work through evenly, so we're just going to stop it right here. But I just wanted to show you how like the process works, okay? So we do the completing the square, and then when we get to this point, we pick up with what we learned in objective 13, okay? All right, so let's do some problems that we can complete. So for this one again, we just stopping right here. This is just to show you how it's going to work, okay? So now let's do one from start to finish. Okay. Example 4. We got x squared minus 4x minus 5 equals 0. Okay? So remember, if we start out with the 3 terms on the left side, that third term, we want to move it over. So I'm going to add 5 to both sides. It's going to make that go away. And I'm going to have x squared minus 4x equals 5. Okay? Now, I need to find what I'm going to plug in right here and right here. Okay? And to do that, I'm going to come over here and do 1/2 times the coefficient of x squared. The coefficient of x is -4. All right? 1/2 times -4 is going to be -2. And I'm going to have to square that. -2 squared is going to be +4. So that is what I will be adding on both sides, 4. So we got x squared minus 4x. And I'm going to add in +4 on both sides. This is the completing the square part of the problem. Now that that's done, I need to factor this into my binomial squared, okay? If I look at this here, that -2 in there, it's a little hint that it's going to be x minus 2 squared. But there are other ways to find it, which we have discussed in previous objectives. So we got our x minus 2 squared equals, and we got 5 plus 4, which is 9. Okay? Now that we are at this point, we're going to do objective 13. Okay? So now that we have something squared equals a perfect square, I can take the square root of both sides. Okay? When I take the square root of x minus 2 squared, what's going to come out is x minus 2. And the square root of 9 is plus and minus 3. If you said just 3, you're wrong, okay? It's plus and minus 3. And so now we have x minus 2 equals plus or minus 3. That means we're going to have to break this up into our two separate problems. So let's come over here with that. So we got x minus 2 equals 3 and x minus 2 equals negative 3. For both of these, we are going to have to add 2 to both sides. And our first x is going to be 3 plus 2, which is 5. And our second x is going to be negative 3 plus 2, which is negative 1. So this is how we pick up at this step and do objective 13 to complete the problem. Okay? Hope it's making sense. From here on out, I am going to stop using the red to show the completing the square. But if this helps you and you want to keep doing it in your notes, by all means, you can continue to do that. All right, let's go on to example 5. We got x squared plus 6x plus 5 equals 0. All right. First things first, when we start the problem and we have that third term in here, we need to move it. So since it's plus 5, I'm going to subtract 5 on both sides. That's going to give me x squared plus 6x equals negative 5. Okay. Now, I'm going to rewrite this right quick and leave a little space because I'm about to figure out how to complete the square. So my coefficient of x is 6. So I have 1/2 times 6 squared. 1/2 times 6 is 3. And then 3 squared is 9, okay? So plus 9 is what I will be adding on both sides. So on this left side, I'm going to break this up or factor it into x plus 3 squared. And on this side, I am going to have negative 5 plus 9, which is going to be 4. So now that I have something squared equals a perfect square, I can take the square root of both sides. So the square root of x plus 3 squared, I'm going to be able to take that x plus 3 out. And the square root of 4 is going to be plus or minus 2. When I break this into two problems, I'm going to have x plus 3 equals 2 and x plus 3 equals negative 2. All right. When I subtract 3 on both sides, my first x is going to be negative 1, and my second x is going to be negative 5. Okay? Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. Okay? Let's look at another problem. Example 6. This one is going to be interesting. All right, so we got x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals 0. Okay, so remember we're trying to do the completing the square method. So this plus 9 here, we're going to have to move it to the other side by subtracting 9 from both sides. So we're going to have x squared minus 6x equals negative 9. Okay. So I need to I need to complete the square. So I'm going to do 1/2 times the coefficient of x, which in this case is negative 6 squared. 1/2 times negative 6 squared. 1/2 times negative 6 is negative 3. And then we have the squared, can't forget that. And negative 3 squared is 9, okay? So I'm going to plug that 9 in on both sides. So we got x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals negative 9 plus 9, okay? So notice what happens. For this particular problem, in the beginning of the problem on the left side, it was already a perfect square trinomial, okay? So what's going to happen is on this right side over here, this is going to end up being 0. So we're basically going to get the original problem that we had back again, okay? So if this happens in your calculations when you add that, when you complete the square and add that number to both sides, that constant term, if you get 0, then it's possible that the original was already a perfect square trinomial. So now we can factor this side to get x minus 3 squared, and it will be equal to 0, okay? So at this point, we will have to take the square root of both sides, all right? When we take the square root of x minus 3 squared, we will take that x minus 3 out, and the square root of 0 is just 0. And so we will be adding 3 to both sides, and the solution is just going to be x equals 3, okay? So for this situation, x is only 3. And if you think about it, how a previous way that we solved these, if we did x minus 3 and x minus 3 and set it equal to 0, and then set both of these individually to 0. This is what we just previously did in a previous objective. We will get x equals 3, okay? So this is just to show you when we take these problems, and in objective 13, we are solving by taking the square roots. In 14, we're solving by completing the square. And in 15, we're doing a different method, but we should get the same answer with different methods if we do the different methods correctly, okay? So just keep that in mind. So for this particular problem, x equals 3 and 3 only. All right? We got 2 more examples, okay? So for example 6, we're going to do another one just like the one we just did, so we can make sure we understand it, okay? So we have x squared plus 10x plus 25 equals 0. We're going to subtract 25 on each side. And if you notice that the problem is already a perfect square trinomial, you still need to do this, okay? Because the problem asked us to solve by completing the square. So if you do not complete the square, you did not do what was asked, and you will not get the full credit, okay? So I need you to do the method that was asked of you, okay? So when I subtract 25 from both sides, I'm going to get x squared plus 10x equals negative 25. I'm going to use that coefficient of x, that 10, to plug it into here. 1/2 times 10 squared is going to be 5 squared, which is going to be 25. So I'm going to add that 25 in on both sides. Okay. On this side, because I have the negative 25 plus 25, it's going to be 0. And we just said that that's because the original problem was already a perfect square trinomial, okay? So let's say you factor this and you do it like this, okay? You don't do the shortcut. You do it this way. You find the two numbers that multiply to be positive 25 and add to be positive 10, and you do it like this, okay? If this is how you found it, that's okay. Your next step, you're going to write it like this, okay? it needs to be like this, so that you can kind of get the picture of us taking the square root of both sides. Okay, so even if you do it like that, go ahead and rewrite it as a binomial squared so that you can take the square root of both sides. Okay, that may help you understand what's going on. So when we do that, when we take the square root of x plus 5 squared, that x plus 5 is going to come out and it's going to be equal to 0. And when we subtract 5 from both sides, x is going to be -5 and -5 only. Okay? Hope you got that. All right? And for our last example, example 7, we have x squared minus 6x minus 7 equals 0. We're going to add 7 to both sides, and that is going to give us x squared minus 6x equals 7. Okay? I'm going to come over here and do my 1/2 times -6 squared. That's going to be -3 squared, which is going to be 9. So that 9 I'm going to now add to both sides. So I got x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals 7 plus 9. Okay? When I factor this side, I'm going to get x minus 3 squared. And when I add this side together, I'm going to get 16. From here, we do objective 13. Okay? We will take the square root of both sides. We will get x minus 3 equals plus and minus 4. We will break it into the two problems. X minus 3 equals 4 and x minus 3 equals -4. Okay? We will add 3 to both sides. And one of my x's is going to be 7. And my other one is going to be -1. Okay? So hopefully you all got the gist and the understanding and the flow of how these problems work. We first will complete the square. Then from there, we will pick up and do what we just previously learned in objective 13. Okay? So that completes objective 14. With this information, you should be able to go on and do the homework and, prepare yourself for the next quiz and everything else you need to do. Okay? So I hope you all understood everything I said in this video. If not, make sure you watch it again, slow it down, take your time while working these problems. Please don't rush through these problems. And I'll see y'all in the next video. Have a nice rest of your day.